What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC, and today we have a pretty unique knife in the Ocoee River 5-blade trapper. Picked this up local shop secondhand for around $25 if I remember correctly, which turns out was a pretty great deal overall, knowing what I know now. Now, at the time, I had never seen a 5-bladed trapper before, although it seems several companies have made them in the past. Most notably is probably Case, who has made both a full-size 5-bladed trapper as well as a mini. And those, from what I can tell, are pretty rare, and if you do come across one, you're going to end up paying a pretty penny for them. Now, Rough Riders also made a mini 5-blade trapper, as well as Frost Cutlery, who is the owner of Ocoee River. It's just another brand name for them. And so they've made some other examples of them. So not exactly rare, but I didn't get the box with this one, and the model number is not stamped or etched on those blades. In fact, only one of the blades has any sort of markings at all. And so it did make it difficult to track down any sort of information on this specific model, like the blade number, when it released, how much it cost at release, what they call this cover. But I was able to find two examples of it on two different auction sites. So one of those sold in 2023 for $60. The other requires a paid membership in order to see what something sells for, but they do provide an estimate, which was $75 to $100. So definitely seems like I got a steal on this one, although that's not really my primary objective. I just thought it was cool, wanted to add it to my collection. Don't really resell knives, so not too worried about the value on this one, but it was still a cool find. Now, everything I was able to find on it was from either those auction listings or another listing of a similar Ocoee River 5-blade trapper with different cover materials, and then just information I was just able to glean from looking at it in person here. So 4 1/8 inch in this closed position. Now this is a thick knife. We have 5 separate springs for those 5 blades, and so probably a little over an inch thick, making this not the most practical to carry, especially when you combine that with the 6.16 ounces that it weighs. And so definitely not a pocket dropper, but actually pretty comfortable to use any of those blades. There's nothing super offensive when you get it into your grip. You feel some of those other blades just naturally because there's so many blades there, but they're not super hot spots or anything like that. So you could use it. To me, it doesn't look like the previous owner ever used it. Only one of the blades shows any sign of wear whatsoever. It looks like we have factory edges on all of them, and the wear that I see looks more like it was from opening and closing the blade than actually using it, but we'll take a closer look at that when we get there. Now, in terms of the covers, so these are definitely bone covers with a really dark and rich stain. I love how you can see the lightening around the bolsters and on the edges. Just looks great and very consistent from that show side to that pal side. Now, I don't know what they call this kind of design on the bone. To me, it looks like a barrel of some sort, and so that's what I'm calling it. Definitely has that barrel feel and look to it with those X's and then the cross patterns here. Now, we do have brass pins as well as brass liners. They do sit a little bit proud, especially the middle pins, but all of them you can feel just a little bit as you brush over them. Now, that's not super concerning for me. One, I don't know how old this knife is. It may not have been quite like that when we first got it. And also, Frost Cutlery makes knives that are in the same price range as Rough Rider, so this probably wasn't a super expensive knife, and so for what it is, I think it has very impressive fit and finish. Now, that shield is still sitting in there completely flush, no movement or anything like that on there, and then our liners are also really well done and no significant gapping between the springs and liners. We do have the brass liners, and there is some minor gapping on the pal side. The last spring and liner on that pal side does have very minor gapping, but I don't even know if that's picking up on the camera. It's so minor, and so that's pretty impressive as well. The only real kind of signs of wear we see from the outside is you're starting to see that pin here. That might be able to be polished out, but that again is going to come with the territory with these older knives, and so I'm fine with that as well. Pretty great blade centering. There is one exception, which is this last blade on that pal side, the same one that has the gapping, that is kind of rubbing up on that liner, and so that's the only one where we see a little bit of wear. But otherwise, everything else looks to be very well centered. And so let's get into the blades from what I can tell, we have a 440 stainless, and the longest blades are just over 3.5 inches long. The shorter ones I didn't measure out, but they're obviously probably about 1.25 inches shorter. So we have 3 nail nicks on that show side and 2 on the pile side. Really well thought out in terms of the placements of the blades and the nail nicks, so you have easy access to all of them. There's none that are really buried behind another blade or anything like that, which has happened to me before. And so really well thought out design in terms of that placement. So we'll start with the first one. Varying levels of pull on these. I'd say 3 of them range in that kind of medium 4.5 to 5.5 range, and then 2 of them are more like 3.5 to 4, or maybe even 3. And so 2 of them are a little bit lighter, and that's kind of to be expected. Again, they all have their own springs, so they might not be consistent in the pull weight. So this first one is one of the heavier ones, probably a good 4.5 or so. This is our pen blade, and this is the only one that has any sort of markings on it whatsoever. So we do have the Ocoee River stamp on the show side, as well as the China etch on that pile side. And you can tell that edge definitely looks like a factory edge, and there's no signs of wear of any sort on this blade. And that's going to be the case with almost all of them until we get to that last one. And so really nice there. No half stops on any of these either, but still nice and snappy and feel great. Next up we have a clip point, probably my favorite blade on here. Really nicely done clip point. And this is completely sterile, so I'm not going to mention that tang again, but we don't have any sort of etch or stamps on any of the rest of them. And yeah, just a great looking blade. And that one's on the lighter side. This is probably the lightest pull of any of them, so this one's probably a 3.5 max, but probably about a 3. Our spey blade is just a tad heavier, but still probably in that 3.5 range. And so we have another full-size spey blade here. This one's again about that 3.5 inches in length. And then we flip over to the pile side to get access to those last 2 blades. And so we have one shorter, one longer. The shorter one, the 4th spring in the lineup, is going to be our sheepsfoot. This one I feel like is the hardest to access, and also pretty similar to our pen blade in pull, but hardest to access, but you still do get access to it. And so nice short sheepsfoot blade here, probably my second favorite blade on this one. I love a sheepsfoot, so love seeing that here. Now I don't know what the purpose of this is, if it's just supposed to be a super well-rounded knife, you have every type of blade shape that you might need throughout the day, or if these were meant more to kind of show off the different style blades that they can put in a trapper, and almost more of a showpiece than a user. But these are all definitely usable blades. So last up we do have the Skinner blade, and this is probably the heaviest pull of any blade on the knife. And so that is a little bit surprising. I kind of expected the shorter blades to feel heavier just because you get less leverage on them. You're closer to the pivot point there where the nail nick is, and so you have a little bit less leverage. But this one's probably the only 5 or above on the knife. I'd say it's probably right at 5. It's still not super heavy. And let's clean my fingerprints off here, and you can see a little bit of where that rub is. So there is a little bit of rub on this one. This one's the only one that shows signs of wear, but to me it looks like wear from opening and closing it more so than actually using the knife. So that's what kind of leads me to believe that this knife was never really used by the previous owner. Probably sat in a drawer somewhere. Maybe they pulled it out and admired it every once in a while and then put it back. But really cool find. I'm glad I was able to pick this up. If you have more information, specifically if you know the model number, it would be great if you could leave that in the comments. It's always cool with these older knives to have as much information as possible, because I only found 2 examples of this when I was Googling. I went to the end of the Google search results before they started repeating, and so there wasn't a whole lot of information out there on this. And maybe one day someone else will pick up this knife and Google that information, and if the model numbers in the comments, I'll update that in the description as well, so this will be a searchable video, and maybe they'll be able to find more information. Or the opposite, maybe they have more information that they can provide that they would only find if they were searching for that model number, which isn't currently going to be listed. And so would love more information on this, but also would just love to hear your thoughts on these. And if you have any 5-bladed trappers from any other brands, which ones you have, and I would love to just kind of see other examples of these. But thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, or joining the channel as a member. They all help the channel out a ton. And as always, I hope you have a great one. Take care.